Oh, camera's on. Welcome. So this is day 12 of Weekend's web app. And I'm a little tired, as you might have seen. Didn't realize the camera's on there. But anyway, so we are going to be working with our IndexedDB estate. We started picking up our IndexedDB information, and now we're going to bring it into our into our app so we can actually make use of it in the routes. But before we do that, if you want to follow along at home and you've pulled down the repo, you'll want to check out day 11 because that's where we finished up last time we ran the string. And we're going to get straight into it, but first I'm going to do a little bit of explanation. So last time, so we are currently on day 12. Oh, got to kill the smoothing, otherwise it's going to ruin my drawing. All right, so when we get information from IndexedDB, so that was our database, and so instead of pulling things from directly from memory, we've got some place that we've kept things, right? Now, when you have things in IndexedDB, when you pull them down with some sort of function, like if we have a look just briefly at our code, so if we jump into database storage, db.ts, so you see this promise here, right here, where we get by key, and we resolve and get the store request, right? So that result comes out of that that request or whatever it is, and then comes into whatever called it. Now, if we have a look at our code, we'll see where it's called just here on line 141, right here. So you can see we've got context.db, and then it gets by key, and it gets the articles based on that slug. Now, if we wanted to do something with that article, then we could, because it comes back as a promise, we could use then, and then if there was an error, we could just pass that error through, and we can do that just by not handling the error. So the alternative is if we wanted to do something special in the case of an error, we could, see daisy, yeah, if we wanted to do something special in case of that error, then we could maybe return the new data error at this point, or rather throw the new data not found error at this point. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to use the standard error handling. But anyway, this article, we can't actually use it in this render function because we haven't put this into state. And I mean, we could get around this like in a really lackadaisical manner if we had some sort of variable here. This variable would hang around. It would be in memory, so to speak. And we could say put something on it. So we could go, all right, so articles params.slug, because we know it's going to be based on the slug, and then we put that there in we put the article in there, right? And then I have an any type, so I'll just give it an any type for now. So then if it was attached to here, then that means that we could then make use of it in our render, like say this paragraph here. In fact, we may as well just, this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but we may as well do this as a sort of here's a really slack way that we could handle this problem, right? So say we had articles, param, or rather, how about we get the article, we'll base it on articles params.slug, and yeah, and then instead of getting the article from wherever, we're going to get the article from here. So we're going to get article, and let me just remind myself what the data for it looks like. All right, yep, so we've got content. So let's say we put content in here. And do we have a title? Yes, we do have a title too. So how about instead of this is an entry page, let's put article title here instead. And sorry, this is like, I just figured it would be a better way to sort of demonstrate this concept in the actual code, because I can do that, right? Okay, so getting the port numbers wrong and everything. All right, so if we get this up and running and have a look at entry 1, Okay, I didn't like that much, so we'll have to figure out what's going on. Possibly because I didn't return anything. This demonstration may not have gone as well as I thought it would. Let's see what this error is. It hasn't actually got anything in the article at all. So how about we load up our database properly? Because we were playing in Firefox last time, so we'll have to make sure that the database starts up properly. So we'll do just that. We'll make sure all the authors and all the other bits and pieces end up in place. Get rid of that. So we get ourselves up and running, and look at precisely what this error is. And this is actually this is a bit of a sidetrack, but this is part of the reason why it's good to change browsers when you're working on this stuff, because this isn't working. The code that we wrote for Firefox is not working in Chrome, so we've got to find out why that is. So let's jump into that. We've got some sort of promise, uncaught promise, but I can't find where that is just yet. So we have to find that place, wherever that is. So yeah, let's go have a bit of a dig. We'll see what we can find. The requested version is less than the existing version. Oh, I see. Okay, righto. So if we delete the database manually, we should be fine. Come on. Dev tools are not the greatest, unfortunately. I wonder if I'll have to manually delete this out. You sit here playing with this sort of thing, and you wonder why on earth would people not be welcoming this with open arms. You can see the dev tools there. I was clicking delete database every single time, and it wasn't deleting the database. But anyway, here we are. Okay, we're back and running. So now we've got the data in there. And I'll just return this back so it's not continually trying to add new items. So you can see here, we've got entry 1 here, and we've got the content for it. And if we back out, go to entry 2, same deal. Entry 3. So this is a really primitive form of in-memory storage, right? This articles object here is a method of storage. Because once you're in this callback scope, like this isn't in any sort of like oopsie daisy. This isn't this article object here. This variable right here is not gonna hang around for long. It's as soon as this goes away, this closure. So once we leave these curly braces, that article goes away. It's only in a sort of a very temporary part of the memory, and it's gonna get removed as soon as it leaves there. But we need to keep it around. And this is a primitive way of doing that. So what we're looking at is this case where when you've got IndexedDB, you've got this this closure that contains the item, right? So that item lives inside. And we need to put that item somewhere if we're to use it again and again and again. Because we land on this page, but as the state changes, for example, if I click increment here, we want to make sure that we still have the information available to render this title and this content. Now, I just did a really basic way to keep sort of that global state around. But really, the ideal is that we put it in our Redux state. So inside our Redux state, we've got the concept of counter, we've got routing. We need some sort of place to keep all of our business data. And that might not be where everything stays eventually, but the idea is we need to get this item into our state. Because our state is the thing that hangs around, that we can get cheaply. Every time we go to IndexedDB, that takes some amount of time. We don't want to have to hit IndexedDB every single time we want to render a view. We want to hit it once during the preload phase. And then for every render, we hit state. So all we'll be looking to do in this in the stream tonight is we're going to be taking this item and getting it into some sort of data structure that will allow us to collect it from the state. Now, what is that data structure? So we probably don't want to keep it in counter, and we probably don't want to keep it in routing. So for now, I'm going to propose we create a little content data structure. We will figure out a better one down the track, but for now we just want to test the idea, right? So we're just going to have a little content one, and inside it is going to have all the articles and all the authors. And the way these are going to be organized is by key. So they're simply going to be ID and then article. And same with authors, ID and author. I am not good at drawing curly braces, but anyway. So the idea will be to, whenever we pick up this item, we're going to manually put that there in. So if it was an article, it would go into content articles ID. And if it was an author, it would go into content authors ID. And that way we can just keep on getting that item for use during our render function. So that's going to be our plan. So let's launch into it. As I said, this was a really rough way we could do it, but I mean, we might want to use these articles in other ways. And this is sort of the concept of Redux. We've got lots of ways we want to use this stuff, so it probably doesn't make sense that we only use it this way. So let's sort that out. So what we really want to be able to do is from the app state we'll get these articles. So it'll be something like appstate.content.articles. That's what we want to be able to do. But content does not exist on .articles. Content does not exist in app state yet. So that's the bridge that we need to cross. And in order to do this, I think we're going to also put this in test data, simply because we know that test data this is temporary, right? We're going to make a temporary state bundle that we're going to use for this sort of thing. So I'm going to use routing state as sort of a template for all this. And eventually we'll make a proper template that we can use for making state whenever we need to. But for now, I'm just gonna roll with the old copy paste and get ourselves started. I'm gonna bring this over onto the left hand side, and here we go. Okay, so we've got this concept of state. We need to pull the state bundle and whatnot from platform. So we'll do just that. Okay. So router state, we're not going to do that. We're going to do content state. And in this case, I'm not going to be super stressed about the exact structure of it. So instead, we're going to allow it to sort of have almost anything. Is that it? Yes, that is it. Okay. So this content state, this is this key string and then object key string. All that means is this thing will have some number of keys. So for instance, a content type like articles, and then inside it will have keys and then objects inside of it. So for the articles, it'll look something like entry 1, and then inside that will be the article, and then entry 2, and inside that will be the article, and so on and so forth. So that's sort of our structure, just our basic structure, so that we can keep things around for rendering. So this initial state for now is we're going to give it articles and authors. and that's going to be based on content state. Right. And we're not going to give any information, like we're not going to bother with something to allow us to remove things from the store or like delete things from the store. It's literally just going to be like putting things inside of it. So put content. Put content is what we want to do. Okie dokie. So here, we've only got one action type we're going to care about, and it's going to be put content. So if action.type equals put content, and then we're going to do our thing. So put content state here. So essentially all we'd be looking to do is to object assign our onto state something new. Let me get rid of all this. Okay, so first, for each of these actions, actually instead I'll talk about the action as well. So when we create the action, it's going to have like a data type. So that's either going to be articles or authors there. And then data key. And then the data itself, which is going to be any. And that's essentially going to be the entirety of our action. Data type, data key, data. So this is going to be one of those things where I try to see it through because I think it'll demonstrate things a bit better than if I was to sort of do it haphazardly or anything like that. So bear with me while I just try and get through all of this as quickly as I can. Hang on, what's that? Content state shape. And content actions shape. Okay. Here we are. So we've created this action creator, and we want to accept this action creator so it adds to this content state whenever this information comes in. So essentially what we're looking to do is find the particular object that we're into. So like the data store, as it were, will come from state action.data type. So if action.data type would say actions, then it would grab articles. It would grab state.articles. Otherwise, it would grab state.authors if we were looking to load up an author, right? And once we've got that data store, we'll know what the next shape of that data store will look like, because what we'll do is do object.assign. We'll assign the data store. And then we will put on top of it, we'll put, I just made a typo there. Let me get rid of that. And then after that, we need to sort of provide an object that sort of has that key there. And let me take this opportunity to introduce a new sort of syntax that we're allowed to do with later versions of JavaScript. So, see, the long-winded way of doing this would be to do something like action.datakey. Get rid of that const there. And then put action.data on the end of it, right? So that becomes sort of an object that just has that one article. Now, if we were to, then we could assign that onto the end of that data store by giving it updates. So then we have this sitting on the end here. And then finally, we can assign that after here to, so now if we did const state updates, and then we go state updates, action.dataType, and then add next data store. That could give us a really long-winded way to update all of this in an immutable way. Because remember, we don't want to change old objects. We don't want to do something trivial like, say, state action.dataType and then action.data equals data. If we do that, it'll take action.data there. That would technically work, but it wouldn't preserve the immutability of the way Redux works. So we wouldn't be able to rewind any of that good stuff, and potentially it messes up rendering. All sorts of things can happen, right? So we don't want to do that if we can avoid it. We want to finally put the update on at the end, and then if we made these any types, that would sort of work, right? But there's an awful lot of syntax there for achieving really not a lot, right? So could we do this a little simpler? We have this concept in later versions of ECMAScript, and TypeScript supports it as well, of the spread operator. And what this allows us to do is to say, make this, if we return the object like this, it would essentially copy all the variables into the object. But then what we can also do is add another object using using the ... update. So we could go state and then updates, and this would technically work. So we could change this assign with ... state data store, and then ... updates. And then that gets us a little bit of the way, but we can get even further, because updates, what if we were able to do something where we were able to put in the key and just put the data? So we got action.data here and action.data key. So this actually works here. So we can update to the next data store using this syntax, which essentially removes the need for all of that. And then it removes the need for all of this, because what we can do is return ... state, and then we can make our state updates be next data store, which is at action.data rather, next data store. So if we wanted to draw that out really quickly, what I mean by that, because I know this might be potentially a bit confusing. So that spread operator, what it does is essentially say, I want a new object. So I want a new object, curly brace here, and then you go ... state. And what that does is that essentially explodes state into what it was before. So it would turn that into something like here, let's make a new object, and then have actions. Whoops, let's get rid of that. I meant to write something different. And then we'd have authors. And that's going to be state.authors. And what's the other one? Articles. And that's going to become state.articles. So we're essentially making a new object, but it just happens to have all the same properties as state, because it has authors state.authors and articles state.articles. And then where that gets interesting is now, see, we did this a second time where we've got this action.dataType. So what that does is it updates now. So this part, it takes action.dataType equals next data, or rather next data. And based on this, if this action.data type was authors, then it would essentially, if I do this a different color here, so if it does this part here, and it would just, if it was authors, it would put that in place of this one here. So that allows you to overwrite these properties without actually changing state. State does not get changed because you're just putting in references to state.authors and state.articles. Possibly not the best explanation. There are other things that you can read out there. I would recommend if it still doesn't make sense. Let me have a look on MDN. Spread objects. So spread syntax is the one that you want to look at if you're looking for this sort of information. So for object literals, for array literals, and for function calls, this spread syntax is where to go if you want to look for more information on that concept. But anyway, we're going to see this through. So now we've got this concept where every time you run a put content action, it's going to add it to our state. So we're going to try and just make use of that, right? So we're going to add this to our app state. So here in Weekends Web App state, we're going to grab from import. We're going to import content state shape and content actions shape, and that is all going to come from test data state. And we'll chuck that in there. That in here. So now we've got that in our state shape, but we still need to load the bundle itself. So we'll go ahead and do that now. We'll grab it at our app.ts. What am I looking for? So yeah, we'll grab content state bundle. And we're going to be getting that from .testdata/state. Put that just there. And now we will pop that into our function that creates the state store. So that content state bundle. So the first thing we're going to do is check if that actually loads, if it doesn't crash or anything like that. All right, well, it seemed to work. Oh, maybe not. Okay, it couldn't read property. So that was just the problem with the route, okay? So we go into any of these and you can see that the route itself fails in rendering, and that's good to see that our error handling is doing just fine. Okay, and yeah, you still got that counter there and all that good stuff. But anyway, so with that error handling, if we take a look at Redux, and we just have a look at the shape of the state, you'll see that while no actions have taken place involving it, that initial state is taking. So you can see the articles and the authors just there. Well, now we just need to put things in there, right? So let's see if we can do just that. So where do we jump to? Here we go. No, that's not it. We want to go to where the entries are picked up. So you can see here, this is where we originally had that little like keeping stuff in that constant, that articles variable. Well, what we probably want to do instead is have access to those actions so that we can put this into state instead. And unfortunately, we don't have access to that using context, but it seems like context might be the sensible place to put this concept of actions so that we can do more with it. So you can see here we've got context. Well, how about we add something more to context, like those actions, right? So we got weekends. Let's go app state.ts. So you can see here this web app context. Well, how about if we had something that looked like weekends web app actions in there as well? And we made that available. And then we go actions equals actions bundle. Because the thing about these actions is, yeah, like we could pass them explicitly all over the place, but the reality is we need this stuff, and we need it pretty regularly, especially if we start using these actions for orchestrating between a whole bunch of different places. So how about we just make a big old bundle and we see how it looks. And it might end up being that we need to start differentiating between ones that interact with state and ones that don't. But let's just leave that just for now. So here at this point, we need to do something to add this to state, right? So how about we do just that? We take our actions, and so we'll have content and we have put content. And let's just say we have articles, because this is an article, right? And then we use article.id as our key, and then the article itself as the final piece. It doesn't have, okay, yeah. Give me anything, there we go, all right. So now maybe our views might just work if we play it like this. Let's have a look and see what happens. Well, that looks promising, didn't it? We have our put content, and that ends up with our entry 1 in that place there. And if we were to go to entry 2, same thing, still works. Entry 3, same thing, still works. And what we now have is we have information that is in memory. And if we jump to one of the later routes, we'll see that that also includes entry 2 and entry 3. Looking good? We've got some information in memory, and that gives us some way in which we can pull all the information that we need to make all of these things happen. Which is great. Good stuff. Carrying on. So that way, each time this re-renders, it doesn't have to go and get the information again because it's already there. So these increments, these decrements, all that changes is that counter. It knows that the article doesn't need to change because we've stored it in memory. We have now made the transition from over here to over here into the state. So how about we go a bit further than this? We don't have the author yet. How about we grab that author? So if we return a promise from inside a promise, we will be able to then run a then afterwards, right? So let's say instead of returning true here, we go context.db.getByKey, and instead we get authors, and we base this after article.authorID. And now we can do something with that. So we can take that author and also put that author into the content store. So this time it'll be authors, and we'll have an author.id, and then we'll put the author in there. So let's see how this goes. I mean, I might have missed something and this won't work, but let's see how it goes. So that seemed to work, and if we look at Redux, we can see two put content actions. We can see the put content of the articles and the put content of the authors. So with both of those in there, we should be able to render the author name inside here, inside the function. So let's see if we can do that. Let's see if we can go get the author from appstate.content.authors, and then this one will come from article.authorID. And then we will add ourselves just a little paragraph that says by author.fullname, I think it is. Let me check that. Full name, yeah. Okay, so now if we reload here, you've got Joe Blogs here, and let's look at entry 1, James Rakic, it's me. And we've got Joe Blogs here for entry 3, and if I was to click on through to entry 4, or rather just force my way over to entry 4, what does that look like again? My bad. Here we go. All right, entry 4, you can see again, we've got a particular author. All hunky-dory, eh? So let me just check that I've actually set this up correctly. So articles.ts, got article 1, 2, okay. So article 3 is by Joe. Okay, and article 2, Jane. Yep, okay, yep. So all the names look like they're working right. So how about now? Well, one big thing that we're missing is this home page, right? And here I'm about to demonstrate one of the key issues with in-memory store if you depend on it entirely. Because you've got to get the information from somewhere, right? But let's say we wanted to show that list of, so see this little list here of entries? Let's say instead we were to render these out as a string. So I'm just gonna make a list here, and then I'm gonna grab all of the articles. So we'll go articles, and that'll all come from appstate.content.articles. Now I can't just run over an object the same way I would a list, like an array. So what I need to do is I'll get all its keys using object.keys, and then I'll map it. So that'll be article ID will be my key here. And then I can get the article by using appstate.content.articles article ID. I should just return that actually. So there's my first thing. I just want to get a list of the articles. I don't want to bother about sorting them or anything like that. We can save that kind of thing for some other time, right? But from here, we then want to render them into this little bit here. So let's make a thing called articles render, which is just going to be a string that actually renders all this out. So again, we will map against articles. We could have done this in one step, but I chose not to because I wanted to. And what we're going to do inside this is simply return a template string that looks just like that, only we're going to change this slug. So instead of hard coding it, it's going to be article.id. I think I've typed that right. And here where it says entry 1, well, let's break the line just to make it so it's not quite so long. And what we'll do here is we'll have the article.title. If we wanted to get cheeky, we could get the author as well, but I'm not going to try and get the author just yet. Actually, no, let's demonstrate that. So we can get the author right now. If we get the author for it, we would need to access appstate.content.articles authors rather, and then get article.id, author ID rather. And who is that by? That's by author.fullname. So we've pulled that out, and instead we're going to put in articles render joined with a new line. So that's essentially like this string again and again, all joined inside here. This is going to look an awful lot like our proper render code when we start to get near it, but we will be using React when we get to that point, but that's sort of getting ahead of itself. For the moment, we're just going to write this HTML right to where we want it to whenever we render. So if we were to just reload on the home page, we're going to see nothing, right? Nothing at all. But if we go back, and if I reload here and then click to home, you can see that first item, that entry 1, and I can click through to it. That's all very well and good, but because based on in-memory store, we don't actually know about any of the other information. So it becomes clear that in order for homepage to load properly, we actually need some sort of preload function. And that preload function is going to be where we venture back into the world of database. So we started off with a concept of getting by key. And that's sufficient if we know the key of a thing that we want, but not sufficient if we want to do some sort of query over more of the database. We want to get more than one thing. So that's what we're going to hit into now. And we're going to dive back into the IndexedDB MDN docs just to make sure that we sort everything out properly. So we'd certainly be doing something off the object store here. And we've got this concept of get. So that returns an IDB request object. Now, sorry about that. So this is where I need to start to think about how I go about doing this stuff again. That would be get by key or get key. Well, how about we just go for get all? Yeah. So get all allows us to retrieve all objects in the object store matching the specified parameter or all objects in the store if no parameters are given. So this is sort of our query sort of parameter. And the queries like this doesn't have a query language. Let's be straight up here. It has these concept of key ranges, which allows you to limit things a little bit, but it doesn't give you nearly the amount of control that a proper SQL database would give you. So you end up having to do a lot of work to really get things working for you. But as it stands, get all would theoretically be enough for us to get everything. So while we will eventually complicate this and actually do a bit more with our information here, to start off with, let's just use get all and see what comes out of it. Get all here, and we're just going to use store name. So we are distinctly starting in the world of the naive here. We're not going to try and do anything particularly complex, and we're just going to see what comes out of it. So here we're going to use the function of get all instead, and we're not going to use any sort of key. IDB object store? What are you talking about? Yes, get all does exist on you. Or is this a new thing that isn't supported by the types? Okay. Well, anyway, we're going to charge on and see what the result from this is before we get too worried about what this means for us. Yeah, I was just looking at the documentation, and it's not 100% clear how this is all going to come together, and that is the story of our life when we start working with these sort of bleeding edge specs. It's one of those things where even though this technology has technically been around for 4 or 5 years, it's definitely not been the focus of web to do things well offline. And it just shows, like, even in stuff like service workers and whatnot, yeah, like it's the new hot thing and everyone's pushing it, but the edges are really clear, right? Anyway, let's test this out and just see what happens, okay? It'll probably implode on us, but that's fine. We'll just figure out where it goes from there. So what we're looking to do is run db.getAll, and we're going to get all of the authors, and we need to get all of the articles as well. So let's return a promise.all. That includes contextdb get all authors, and contextdb get all articles. Again, efficiency is not our concern right now. Okay, so let's just blow up the code and we'll see what happens. If in doubt, make it break. Nothing broke. Because we're on the home page, so something must have worked. So there's that success for us, and here is all of the items. Okay, great. All right. So get all does work. Now, I mean, this is not probably the most optimal way of doing this sort of thing. We're going to have to coerce this to any because it doesn't seem to think that get all exists in TypeScript for some reason. But I mean, this technically works. And I mean, there might be some browser compatibility issues or whatever, but you can see the items right here. You've got entry 1, 2, 3, 4, and you've got the authors here. So what we need to do with them is we need to resolve and return them. And it certainly looks like if store request.result is that there, then that is also correct. We've got everything that we need right there. So if that's the case, all we need to do is put them into the data store. Pretty cool, huh? We've got everything that we need straight off there. So if we're going to do that, then we need to, on each of them, we need to do something with articles when they come out, just like that. So then authors, oh, I've got this the wrong way around. Articles, like that, and then authors on this one. And you can see here, sorry, you can see over here that these are just in shape. So we should be able to just iterate over all of these and just chuck them in. So if we were to do something like authors.forEach, my typing is really lagging at the moment. All right, author, and then inside each of these, so that's not entirely accurate. It's not getting precisely what it is, but what we're meant to be getting, what's meant to be returned here each time is a promise of any, an array of any. No, doesn't like that. How about that? Does it like that? No, I don't like that either. It was not a fan. Okay, any. You know, I'm not going to bother trying to convince it of its types just yet. So how about here, where we've got authors, this result, we know it's an array of anything. So I'm going to do just that. So for each of these, we're going to, with context.actions, we're going to go for content and put the content, which is going to be authors, author.id, and then finally the author in place. And then for this one here, we're pretty much doing exactly the same thing, except wherever it says authors, we're going to put articles. Cool. So if we do this now, you can see it's loaded all our stuff. None of it's in order, because even though it's an array, it comes back in all sorts of weird and wacky wonderful orders. It doesn't actually have an order that it's meant to return into. And we could force that sort of thing with the database, but I mean, that's not something you can bet on, because there's all sorts of reasons why an object might end up out of order. So it's always going to be better for us in the long run if we actually sort it in the view here. So what we could do here is where it has the articles, how about we do something where after we get the articles, we also sort them. We have a sort function, and that sort function mutates it, so we don't actually have to return a new one. And it doesn't like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to return a.title, because these do have titles, and we're just going to sort them with a function called localCompare, which is essentially a dictionary. Like it gives us a way to sort strings using locale information and stuff like that. I know I'm glossing over it, but anyway. So if we have a look at it now, maybe it didn't actually pick up. Let me just check that this is actually working. There's the information. What does it look like when it compares it? is -1. Interesting that. That doesn't sound quite right. Let me check locale compare, because it shouldn't be behaving like that in my opinion. So reference string, compare string, locale compare. That's odd. Why would all of those come up as -1? I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, this is an odd one where I'm not entirely sure what precisely I've done wrong, because all of these are not equal, that's for sure. I could do something weird here. I could do something like, I can't even compare it like that. Anyway, this sort function is meant to return either 0, 1, or -1. And, I think it might be tripping up on the space or something like that. I don't usually have an issue with locale compare, just using it as it says here in the docs. And I mean, we can test this here as a concept, right? We've got A. You can see A is equal to A. A is not equal to B, and you can see if it was B and A, then it would come back as a positive number. There you go. So what about these ones here? Let's test some of them. Like we've got entry 4 and entry 1. -1, okay. And what about entry 1 and entry 3? I wonder what's going on here, because if this one, we've got entry 1 and entry 1, that should be a 0. Yeah, it should. And what about with an A? Thought this. Maybe it is not mutating. Maybe I've told you all a lie. No, it does mutate. You can see for yourself right there that it's not changing the result there. What if I reverse things here? Okay. Oh, of course, it is actually sorting just fine. It's just not sorting by the numbers. And maybe if I wanted to do that, if I wanted to be more specific about that, maybe, yeah, that's just me having a total brain fart there. I apologize. It is, of course, alphabetically sorted. But what if we wanted to do something like this? And that's not going to update unless we destroy the database. So let's do just that. We'll delete the database and we'll jump into app.ts. I'll bring this into a new line just so we can keep on swapping between them. Okay, so now we've got data that looks more like something we can use. This is the interesting thing about data, is sometimes you'll swear black and blue that you're looking at the right thing. But it's so easy, especially when you're programming, to just overlook some really basic bit of data. Like even something that you would consider absolutely trivial is a mistake that you will make even once you become experienced. Because the simple fact is you just get really good at covering over little bits of information if you're not careful in your own mind. Anyway, so if we swap this back now, this a.title with b.title, now we can have 1, 2, 3, 4, and all of those are in order, and we're sorting them leading into the data. And this leaves us at some sort of place where we've got this information. So if we sort of landed at this point here on these entry pages, all the database is going to do is get the auth and the article. That's it. It's not going to try and get any more because it doesn't need any more. But the moment it goes to home, it knows that it needs to pick up all those other things, and it's going to download them all into the, bring them all into the memory state. Okay. Now we could also do some optimization eventually. We could do something like check out, oh, we're in this page where we've already got entry free, so we don't need to go get that again. That's a potential bit of optimization that we could do. But for the moment, we're happy just to get this information into the state. Now, with 5 minutes remaining, it probably doesn't make sense to open up any additional concepts or try to put any more code in. So what I think it would do well to talk about is precisely what this code and this code here are doing, this early code within any of these view functions. This is a common thing, right? So eventually you've got this state and it's going to explode in scale, right? It's going to have all sorts of data, articles, authors, categories, tags, this, that, and the other. And you don't want to really have to think too much about that, that state. You don't want to have to think about that too much eventually. You want to be able to, once you're in the rendering stage, you just want to think about the very particular slice of information that you think is relevant to you. And this is a fairly common thing, right? If you look at concepts like GraphQL, and I mean, I'll just be name dropping if I went through heaps of them, but the idea is eventually you want to take this large set of data and you want to reduce it down to a very particular set of data that you're interested in. So let's think about how this would work in the context of rendering. So you've got this preload function right here, and you've got this render function right here. So the pre-render makes sure that the state, the preload makes sure that the state has in it what we need in order to render the page. What's missing is something that maybe makes that information then easier to work with. And that is often called some sort of mapping function, because it takes a particular state and changes its shape. It maps it into something that is adequate for the renderer. So let's think about what a mapper would potentially look like this. We won't actually commit the code that we put down, and I'll delete it as soon as I write it, but maybe this will help you think about this sort of as a concept. So say if there was some function in the middle here, and its goal was to take the app state, and after that app state, now I'm putting any here, but what I mean by any is instead of say weekends web app state, let's put that there instead. So this function, what it could do is essentially take all of these various bits and pieces, put them in here, and then at the end it returns something very specific. So it's not even the render function. We wouldn't even put in the render function. So let me get rid of that. So what it would return is essentially all of the things that are needed to do this. So say it returned sorted articles, and it also returned the authors. And it just returned them as an object because we just wanted to do it that way. Or maybe we didn't even do that, right? Like maybe, no, we'll do it that way. So the app state dot content dot authors, it returns that. And then that way, we've got some sort of properties object, or view state. Let's call it view state for now. As sort of a shorthand for what we want to do. And instead, what we can end up doing then is we could pull out from, so we'll get rid of that entries function, and instead we will pull out the sorted articles and the authors from the view state. And this might seem like a trivial thing, but it's really a big deal, because what it allows you to do is start to say, all right, we've got this big, massive app state, and I don't want to care about it too much in my function. Instead, what I want to do is, I can see I need the counter as well. So how about get rid of this, and we need the counter down here. So let's say we need that count as well. Well, what if we pulled that out of the view state as well? So then we start to get a much clearer idea of what it is that each of our views actually uses in the state. And we have this mapping function that allows us to sort of change it, pull it all down, and reduce it down to the very things that we need and nothing more. And what that means is that we can then have a sort of a view code that is very concise. It's like straight to the point. It only is concerned with rendering. It's not concerned with any of the sorting or any of this other logic that potentially belongs somewhere else. And that's eventually where we'll be going, some sort of mapping function that will allow us to do that. But that's just sort of a sidebar. What we're going to be doing is really exploring doing better things with our index database the next time around we hit this project. So for the moment, I'm going to undo all of this because I don't actually want to save that because that's not going to be working code. And there we go. All right, so we should have ourselves some working code right there. Let me just check that that is the case. If we click into entry 4, that's all good. And I'm just going to check whether entry 5 runs into dramas. And it should. With a 405, entry 5 in articles could not be found. All right, so notice that even though we've got this promissory behavior, here, what's going to happen is when it goes to this one, it rejects. Because this then function does not have an error handling function, it doesn't even do these. Doesn't even hit this code. It immediately breaks out and goes up to the top level where something deals with that error. And that something is this router function that turns it into a 404 error. So that leaves us in a sort of a good spot where we're getting our IndexedDB data into state. So that gives us, that's a little bit of a sidebar because that's more of integration stuff. We're going to have to go back next week. We're going to have to start thinking more and more about a better interface for our database, because at the moment it's really just sort of put together with duct tape and glue. It works, but it doesn't work great, and it's not going to support us when we go long term into developing the application. So if there are any questions or anything like that, now is the time to ping me. But I'm just going to commit all this work and then sign off for the night. So what do we do today? Day 12. Bring IndexedDB data into state, into in-memory state. Also implement get all. All right, that was the entirety of it. So we'll also tag that with day 12, we'll push it up, and then we'll push up the tags. As usual, if you're interested in following along at home, you'll be able to see all of the data that we've been pushing up and whatnot at github.com/weareoffsider/weekendswebapp. And you'll be able to watch all of what's happening, follow along at home, all that good stuff. But that's pretty much it from me. Thanks for watching. See you next time.